Okay, so Bezras Hashem, we're continuing tonight with our weekly shir on the Torah of the Goyin and the Tzaddik, Rav Yitzchak Maya Morgenstern Shlita. And this week, Baruch Hashem, I was in the Beis Medrash on Thursday, so I was able to get the secondary, not the secondary, but the new level of printout, which is much shorter. It's like 8 pages. It contains a powerful punch. It's not the 90-page kuntris, but it took me a while to start learning the shorter kuntrisim because I'm very loyal to the older kuntris. But once the older kuntris started sending out the newer kuntris also, I figured it was okay to learn the newer kuntris as well. But we're going to learn a piece which is simple, but it's something that is nogea ad hanefesh for me, and that's generally where the Torah I'm looking for comes from, the one that speaks to me. But this is an inyan that all tzaddikim carry, but especially the Rebbe, as I've been told and experienced a little bit of, that the Avas Yisrael that is needed by the tzaddikim is not simply a midah tova that comes along with other midos tovos, but it is a fundamental prerequisite to the other elements that the tzaddikim are bringing down. Avas Hashem, Avas HaTorah, and Avas Yisrael. They are chut HaMeshulish that cannot be detached from one another. One who has an Avas HaTorah and one who has an Avas Hashem without an Avas Yisrael, it's a pegam, or it's a clear sign to stay away from the Avas HaTorah and the Avas Hashem of a tzaddik like that. A tzaddik, the job of a tzaddik to a certain degree is to be the defendant of Klal Yisrael. Without Klal Yisrael, and Moshe Rabbeinu taught us this inyan more powerfully than anyone, because Moshe Rabbeinu is the shorish of all tzaddikim, and he's the continuation of all tzaddikim as well. The imno mechenina mesifrecha, erase me from this book. Without Klal Yisrael, I'm nothing. The entire tachlis of my existence, says Moshe Rabbeinu, is Klal Yisrael. And therefore we see by the tzaddikim hamiyuchadim, by the tzaddikei yisod olam, tzaddikei emes, that Avas Yisrael, there was a hagdasha on Avas Yisrael, ad b'li sof, which didn't mean an act of showing love necessarily externally, but a tolerance, a patience, and a deep understanding that this person standing in front of me carries a secret that I can never come to understand. That, as Rabbi Nosson of Nimverov says, there's nothing more difficult, there's no harder sugya in the world than another yid. And that applies even more so to ourselves. But the hardest thing in the world to know, Rabbi Nosson says, is to know where I stand in this world. But to be makabel each and every yid. And I saw, either from the Apta Rav, whose yahrzeit might be tonight, I definitely saw the Rebbe brought it down. I saw it this week, I don't remember where, that if Klal Yisrael had to accept the Torah prior to receiving the Torah, that means that they were asked about each mitzvah. Which means that prior to Kabbalah Satira, each and every yid from Klal Yisrael was asked, are you ready to be makabel upon yourself? V'ahavta l'reacha kamocha. V'ahavta l'reacha kamocha. Are you prepared to love every other Jew as you love yourself? And Klal Yisrael accepted that call, which means that there's a demand and a mesiras nefesh, but a latent ability to love every yid the way that we love ourselves. More often than not, the difficulty with understanding this sugya is the difficulty with understanding what the word love means. Right? To love oneself is a hard enough concept. The word love is a broken word. What it means is to give space to each and every other yid and to recognize that in the face of this other person, I am smaller. That the sheer presence of another yid's face and my awareness of the power of what a yid is naturally brings me to a place of bittul, and bittul offers space to another person. And most fundamentally, it ensures, forget being kind to another, it ensures that I don't want to cause any element of pain to another human being, ever. And with this, we're going to read the words of the tzaddik. The words of the tzaddik in this context carry far more weight than any explanation can, and that's true in all contexts. But I wanted to contextualize a little bit of what we're going to be speaking about. Hine b'chol echad me'Yisrael. And this is a Shalashudas drasha that was given Parshas Vayikra in Tafshin Samech Ches. So these were earlier years. The Rebbe started giving over in Tafshin Samech Daled in a revealed way. So Tafshin Samech Ches was already earlier years. One of the most remarkable things about learning the Rebbe's Torah is that you're learning the Rebbe, let's say, in the Ayin Aleph, Ayin Beis, Ayin Gimel. You're learning the Rebbe in Pei Aleph, Pei Beis, Pei Gimel. It's not only the same, it's the exact same Torah as it was in Samech Daled, Samech Ches, Samech Vav. It's an inyan of emes, that the aleph to the mem to the taf, it's the same. Sure, there are new sugyas that reveal the concepts in a deeper way, but the Torah is b'li shinoi. It's the same nekudos from the beginning to the end. With regards to each and every person from Klal Yisrael, Yesh lo nekuda pratis ba'avodas Hashem she'ein b'chol echad me'Yisrael. Each and every Yid carries within themselves a particular element, a particular secret of avodas Hashem that no other human being is capable of carrying. The Chedush Arim very famously says that each and every person, each and every Yid, has a nekudas hachein that is mis'ala to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, a point of grace that HaKadosh Baruch Hu sees and loves in that person that no other Jew in the history of existence can offer. Ukeshegormim loy chalisha sadas, and when I accidentally or deliberately cause some weakening of the das of another Yid by causing them some discomfort psychologically, physically, chas v'shalom, yecholim levatel bazeh es nekudas avodas ha'pratis. Not only am I not accomplishing the love that I need to have for that other person, but I am causing a nullification of this Yid's avodah. This Yid that I'm bothering, this Yid that I'm honking at, this Yid that I'm adding a little bit more frustration at because I feel that I'm allowed to, I feel justified in my anger. I am also being goyrim for his avodas Hashem to be nifsak for that second, which is taking away from HaKadosh Baruch Hu a nekuda of chen kavyachol that he's not getting from anybody else.
Where one draw the line between that and chinuch?
Chen and chinuch. Okay, so it's a tremendous question, and chen and chinuch are obviously the same lashon, right? As the Mittler Rebbe points out. So chinuch has to be b'derech chen, but in chinuch, when a person's child, I can't speak about chinuch. However, I should be zocheh to speak about chinuch. Another share. B'shoyelim b'shamayim, and at that point, when a person is goyrim a certain sar, Alma v'lama hifsik ploini lavoi des Hashem l'rega. In Shemayim, they're going to say, what happened to this nekuda of chen? What happened to this point of pleasure that was ascendant from this particular Yid? At that point in Shemayim, it's going to be misbarer, it's going to be clarified, Shakol lachol hayamachmes agmas nefesh ezeh shagarim lo. The cause of that discrepancy and that breakage and that other individual's ability to serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu is the result of the agmas nefesh that was, here we're talking about deliberately caused agmas nefesh. There are gradations to the care that one must place in their lives to ensure that they don't even bring themselves to a place where they can be goyrim tsar to another Yid. But we're not talking about the accidental tsar that we cause simply because of our own self-centeredness. That's a natural kind of hazard of being a human being. Most people are self-centered, and by nature a self-centered creature is not necessarily paying attention to the needs of each and other person. Here we're talking, at least in my humble understanding, of any element of deliberate frustration or causing of pain, which includes justifiable resentments that we hold against other people. Even if I'm justified, it does not give me an excuse to be goyrim any element of agmas nefesh to another Yid. Oy la'oisai busha v'chima. And therefore, it is upon us, it is incumbent upon us to attach ourselves and to cleave ourselves to the path of the Baal Shem Tov HaKadosh. What is it that allowed all of the worlds to be opened in front of the Baal Shem Tov HaKadosh? It was not his sigufim, it was not his dveikus b'Hashem, it was not his emunah b'Hashem. And again, the Baal Shem Tov was at the top level of all of these dargos. But what was it that opened up all of the worlds for the Baal Shem Tov? Shelo haya olam echad shahaya sagur b'fanav. But there was not one world that was closed off in front of the Heilige Baal Shem Tov. V'zachali chalal b'Moshe Rabbeinu be'emes. Like all of the tzaddikim, like the Gra, the Baal Shem Tov, they're all mekusharim to the nekuda of the das of Moshe. Hakol lachol hal yadei ahavas Yisrael. All of it was opened up through ahavas Yisrael, through the ability to believe in the neshama that rests at the heart of each and every Yid. Hiloi rak shehitiagei alis pal b'mesiras nefesh mamish. Elehimshich al kol nefesh meYisrael bonne chayu mezayne v'shefa ruchani. Not only was there a tefillah to be zoichet to see other Yidin, but there was a deep desire to be mamshich bonne chayu mezayne to each and every Yid. It's not enough to not bother a Yid. The need is to want this Yid to have hatzlacha, which is a hard thing from a psychological perspective, whereas the Baal HaSulam says, there's really no tsar in this world. All there is jealousy. All tsar comes from the sense that this person has that, and therefore I don't have this. I have a little because that person has a lot. And kina is the goyim, is the cause of all discrepancies and all desire to be better than the other, to acquire more, to eat more, to have more. It's the root of capitalism. It's the root of all things. The ikra kol haya nekuda says klalis ve'achdus im nishmas Yisrael. The ikra nekuda was the deep connectivity and the inclusion within the unity of the souls of Klal Yisrael. The Amru Chazal, And Chazal tell us, Shabiyom Adin, in the day of judgment, Shoyel Masa Adam, what's going to be asked of the individual is Hamlachta es chavercha alacha benachas. Rav Chaim Vital in Shari Kedusha, in Chelek Beis Shar Beis, says that Chazal of Lashon, that not only will be asked if we were noisein v'noitel be'amuna, if we had kashrus and mammon, if we were mitzapah to geula, but did I give kingship to my friend benachas? Meaning in the positioning of relationality between another person in this world, that I allow myself to take the position of potentially being wrong and not having everything to say. That I put myself second in order that the other person can have space to express themselves. Hamlachta es chavercha alecha benachas. Have you crowned your friend upon you with nachas? Hainu, what does this mean, says the Rebbe? Sheshoyelim oisai ha'im hisnagta im chaver kamei melech. Did you treat your friend like they were a melech? And as Rabbeinu tells us, each and every yid is a melech over something. Each and every person is a melech over something. And therefore each and every person deserves to be treated like a melech. And the question of a friend is, did you show your friend that they're a melech? Were you able to allow them to see their malchus? Have you been able to feel the chashivas, the significance of each and every yid, as if they were a melech? They may be a destitute king, they may be a forlorn king who's lost their kingship long ago. They may be a king who's holding over a kingdom that's never been theirs, but nevertheless they're a king. And to make a cheshbon with any movement or any gesture that I engage in as to whether I am approaching my friend with the kavod that they need, that they desire. And all the more so, forget about the asay tov here, that sur meira is ensure that you're not causing agmas nefesh to someone, and you're not being mezalzel another yid. Zeh masha Baal Shem Tov pasach derechayim l'chol talmidav. This is the pathway that the Baal Shem Tov has opened up in front of all of his students. V'chol ha-mekusharim lav ad bias goyel. And all those who are mekusher to him until the coming of the Messiah is the question of, do you love your friend? And a friend is Klal Yisrael. Do you recognize the neshama? Kol ma shepasach lahem olamas elyonim. Every world that has been opened up by the Baal Shem Tov and by the tzaddikim for the Talmidim, shekol echad me Yisrael bevada yachol lahasi kol zos. The Baal Shem Tov, the tzaddikim opened up that we can all do this. It's not a question of possibility. Tendency towards anger, tendency towards holding resentments, istiness, yakir, whatever the reason is that I find myself frustrated, even if I'm amongst the worst of the worst, it doesn't make a difference. It's just a harder avoida now to be malamed zchus. Somebody being frustrating, somebody being annoying is a hechsher mitzvah to limud zchus. It's not a reason not to be malamed zchus. It's a new opportunity to overcome and be malamed zchus. V'atnai esan lazehu avas chaverim. And the way to learn to love Klal Yisrael is to love your friend. Rabbeinu says, Rabbi Nachman says, there are shlosha nekudos in this world. Maharash said the problem with so many people is that we remembered two of the nekudos of Chibur that Rabbeinu brought down, but we forgot the third. There's the nekuda of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, there's the nekuda of the tzaddik, and there's the nekuda of the chaver. And yes, we have a deep hiskashus to the nekuda of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, to the nekuda of the tzaddik, but to the nekuda HaChaver we tend to forget. Bala Sulam said that the ikar nekuda of bechira that a person has in this world is chevra. Everything else is foreseen from the get-go. What we get to choose is who we hang out with. Beis Yisrael of Gur Schusia Ganalenu said that Chazal, when they tell us Habal l'tayr Messianoso, that someone who comes to purify themselves, HaKadosh Baruch Hu offers help, because the game is rigged in the end. Hashem wants us to be matzliach. How do they help? They help with a good friend. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is mazmin a chaver, nekudas a chaver, a chibur, a question of connectivity. And we see where a chaver comes from. Rav Moshe Weinberger Shlita gave a shiur a few years ago on Shabbos Shuvah about the shirish of a chaver. The first time that we see the notion of a chaver given over was with Yehuda in the encounter with Tamar. I'm forgetting the name of his friend, but his friend brought back, he said, you have to go get my staff and my coat because I'm in a stuck spot right now. Isha Adulami. Isha Adulami. That's the first place that we see the secret of friendship. Someone who is there. Someone who is there, and ish we can say is Rosh Tevos Ein Shem Yesh, because a friend is someone who's there to tell you Ein Shem Yesh. Rabbi Nassan says as follows. Rabbi Nassan says, based on the pasuk in Shir Hashirim, Hayoshevet baganim chaverim makshivim lekolech. Those who sit in the gardens listening to the voices of friends. Rabbi Nassan says something incredible. He says the Zohar HaKadosh says as follows: The language of a gan, of a garden, is also the language of gnus, something disgusting. So what does it mean, hayoshevet baganim chaverim makshivim? Hayoshvim begnusa da'alma. Those who sit amongst the filth of the world, those who find themselves stuck in the lower places in this world, those who feel the gnus of this world, the only way to get through is to find the friend who's willing to sit with you there. And this nekuda of avas chaverim is only a hechsher mitzvah to avas Yisrael. If I can learn to love a friend, I can learn to love Klal Yisrael. Rabbeinu also says, I believe, that a person in his boidedus has to learn to talk to Rabbeinu Shalom like they talk to a friend. And I could speak for myself. There's a very intense difficulty in learning what it means to talk to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. But perhaps the problem is not so much talking to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, it's about talking to a friend. If a person knows how to talk to a friend, they'll know how to talk to HaKadosh Baruch Hu.
How are you finding love?
Love here, avas ichpatiyut, caring. Caring that I should not be goyrim tsar to the other. A desire, ahava, causes me to remove myself from my self-centeredness for a second. Right? Without ahava, it's self-centeredness. Ahava is the ha'ataka, the movement away from my self-centeredness, which naturally is giving of my attention. Right? We know from Rav Dessler's Chlusya Ganalenu that ahava is hav, it's a givingness. It's giving of myself. It's giving of my space, giving of my presence as an individual. V'zois noda bebitcha, and it's known with absolute clarity, with trust, shekol zman she'in mekablam al atzmenu, shela'olam va'ed lo nigram agmas nefesh la'echad me'yisrael b'kavana, that as long as we have not accepted upon ourselves forever, but each day as its own forever, each day we accept upon ourselves that we should not cause any agmas nefesh deliberately to another Jew. Lo nizke l'or hadvekas b'Hashem l'achiyas b'or Baal Shem Tov HaKadosh. A person has not begun to live in the light of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and a person has not begun to walk down the path of the Baal Shem Tov HaKadosh. V'yesh l'zayir b'zeh ma'od, and there's a lot of care that needs to be given to this. Ki hasamach mem ma'akem esaroish bekama v'kama tirutzim shoinim u'mushunim ad shenidme la'adam shaboifen kazeh mutaru k'daymeh. There is no end to the rationalizations and justifications that our minds will go to in order to validate the resentments or the frustration or the anger that we have to another Yid. Hare benevelus v'treifos hayashoyel esaravim zeh kasher. Right? When it comes to kashrus, we talk to a rabbi, we ask about whether it's kasher mutter. V'lo yazorik stam lepiv nevela v'treifa. We wouldn't throw a nevela or a treifa into our mouth without being mavarer. Kol shekein livgoa b'chavod chaveru be'eza oifen shehu. All the more so to cause any element of degradation or pain to that individual. There's nothing more intense than this. All the more so embarrassment, which in accordance with the das of Toisvos, that klal still stands. Right? As Rabbeinu points out, that you cause the whiteness in the face, and that's taking the blood away from a person's face, which is considered an act of chariga. We have to kill ourselves, so to speak, with effort to overcome the desire to be flippant with our words. The Vilna Gaon Schlusya Ganalenu, when he left his family to come to Eretz Yisrael in the guise of Mashiach ben Yosef, to settle the land, to do what he needed to do to bring Mashiach Tzidkenu, he wrote the famous Igeres Hagra. And in that Igeres Hagra, there's a keta that reads as follows. There's a sentence. He wrote this to his family. Kol rega v'rega she'adam soisem espiv zoiche litoim tam or haganas. Every moment that a person closes their mouths, they merit to taste the light of the or haganas. And what the Meforshim say, it's not, don't open your mouth because we don't want to hear you speak. Chas v'shalom, each yid has a lot to say. It's when you close your mouth, when you feel that you're justified in having something to say against somebody else. When you close your mouth at that point, you're zoichet to a tam of oraganas because you were moiser nefesh to overcome what comes most naturally, which is talking about other people. And there are those who have imagined in their minds, like we spoke about last week, that they've reached this darga of anava and shiftless. It appears apparent to them that they know full well the pathways of true humility. But in truth, this is not the case. That even though we all daven 3 times a day, that my spirit should be like dust in front of anybody. And Rabbeinu says as follows, he says that just like the dust is the birthplace of all the valuable objects and all the valuable diamonds, and it's stamped upon and it's trodden upon by every other individual, but it gives back the best of itself, so too a person has to make themselves small, small, small. Again, we need other classes on codependency. We're talking about healthy individuals here, where we have a healthy sense of ourselves. Okay? We say it, but we never give any attention to what this might actually mean to have our souls be like dust for everybody. And the only way to begin this is to actually make some effort to ensure that in my day-to-day happenings, a part of my considerations is how can I ensure that I'm not going to cause anybody tsar here. And again, the added honk is a tsar, the added look is a tsar, as justified as it is. And Lord knows it's justified nearly all the time in our own minds. But the justification of all of it is just there to make the avodah of Mesiras Nefesh even more. That even though I have all of these cheshbonos. And not to hurt, because it's hard. It's hard to judge somebody favorably, but before we can judge somebody favorably, we have to at least care. The first thing is zihirut, care. I can say I'm going to judge everybody favorably, but as I'm driving down the street, I'm cutting people off. I'm not returning a cart. I'm littering. I'm doing this, that, or the other thing. And all of that stems from a low ichpatiyut. It's not a meanness. It's not a hatred. It's a carelessness, which is the general posture of most people in this world, or all people. So the first entryway into the avodah here is to begin to care. Ichpatli, what is going on in the other person's. And it's much harder, meaning coming from America in a place of St. Louis, this is fine, because there's no Yid in there. But here in Eretz Yisrael, meaning the problem is every person who's driving you crazy in traffic is a Yid, right? And so then you have to really kind of hold cup.
Isn't it a reflection upon oneself, though?
Sure, in the sense of the Baal Shem Tov's mirror principle, that what I see in other people is a reflection on me, which might not be what you're saying, meaning the thing.
Caring maybe should be a reflection on something that you have to work on yourself, that you'll be able to afterwards give space to someone else.
Meaning I see someone driving like a madman and I have to realize, okay, maybe there's a place in my life where I drive like a madman. I think that's a fundamental sugya to enter into, but even before the complication of the sugya, to realize that my tendency towards anger and frustration and resentments towards others is my stuff, right? If I was in a place of calmness and in a place of true bittul, of not being in control and being okay with that, then the fact that other people are causing me to feel out of control would not be nogea to me, because I'm already out of control. What's the chiddush? You caused me to realize I'm not out of control. I never thought I was. If I think I'm in control, then naturally the anger response, resentment, is a natural response, I believe, to a feeling of control being taken away from a person. And when control is taken away from a person, there's a natural desire to double down on our attempts at control, which gets us even more frustrated. We raise our voice, we clench tighter. But if I operate with the perspective that nafshi ka'afar l'chol tiyah, I'm not in control anyway, so then memela, anytime I'm getting angry, it's because I'm being medama myself to being in control. And then once a person has that, then you can go into the particular avodah of why is what this person is doing over here causing a reaction in me. But I think that's a shlav nosefet, right? That's being super firm about it. To be simply firm about it is to realize that I don't have a right to get angry at anybody. It's not my space. I'm not in control anyway. Only when we spend time contemplating not causing pain to our friends or others. And in addition to not causing pain, also to believe in the secret of the unity of Klal Yisrael. Not only, like Nati was saying, not only to approach the Sur Meirah, no resentments, no regrets, no hard feelings. Because in the end of the day, that is only causing me harm. Most of the time that I'm walking around with my anger and frustration against the 10 people who have wronged me today, they're not even aware of it. And therefore I'm walking around, as they say, I'm drinking poison thinking I'm going to hurt the other person. Right? Those resentments are just kind of holding on to frustration and anger, when the other person has walked away, likely unaware that they've caused me any element of pain whatsoever. Most people are careless and self-centered and not mean. A mean person deliberately hurts. A careless person does it accidentally. So for me to hold on to my kpedus and my resentments towards that accident that the other person caused, it's all dimyonos. I'm the one carrying around that frustration. And at the end of the night anyway, I'm going to have to say, Rabbanu Shleilam, help me take off this garment of resentment. Harini mochel l'chol mi. I forgive everybody. All the more so how beneficial it would be to be able to do this in the moment, or 5 minutes every hour to check in and see where are my resentments at and let me forgive. Because otherwise, by the time I make it to minyan, I'm already angry, frustrated at 12 people, and then I'm supposed to sit and daven. Because I'm holding on to the resentments of all of the frustrations and hurts.
Is that only pogea to the individual or to the others as well?
The way I understand is that it's pogea to the individual. Now, there are mechanisms of thinking, right, where we tend to begin to see that the impact of our thought can have some sort of practical impact, right, very much associated that, like, if I bring negative thoughts into the situation, then that person may have some sort of element that my negative thinking can influence the other person. Certainly true, and it's written in the books, but I think, as I understand it for myself, that's already like a spiritual, lofty level. Adrabah, it's like if I'm thinking negatively, then naturally I'm going to treat that person negatively. Right? You see this in Rabbeinu also, in Torah Reish Pei Beis, that if I'm malamed zchus on another person, then be'emes that person has an aliyas b'zchus, with the implication being that there's an almost, lahavdil, a magical power to thinking. That if I think, and I have this like, lahavdil alfei avdalos, these laws of attraction in my mind, if I think hard enough, then that person will be impacted by my thoughts. That's not necessarily untrue, but it's a very delicate path in between that and avodah zarah. Because we gave a shiur based on the Rebbe that the power of thinking is not that thought is powerful enough to create a change. It's that HaKadosh Baruch Hu has created a mechanism called thinking, which when we access it properly, HaKadosh Baruch Hu carries out the positive expression of that thought. So Mamela, the thinking will have an impact one way or another, but it's not because of a law of attraction, and it's not because I've brought that energy, so to speak, into reality. Does that make sense?
Connected to that energy.
Connected in one way or another. Spooky action at a distance. We don't know how or why, but HaKadosh Baruch Hu sees the thought and does what he does with the thought. But it's not that a thought has any power, bifnei atzmo. Our own thinking can impact our spiritual functioning, but when you learn Reish Pei Beis, there's many levels to learn Reish Pei Beis, but by me judging somebody favorably, I can then truly see the favor within that person. And when I can see the favor within that person, then Mamela, I'm going to treat that person differently, and Mamela, if I treat that person differently, they're going to react differently. And then it creates a natural expression and an outgrowth of Nekudas Tovos, even from a psychological, educational perspective.
Even if it's going to hurt me in a way. Rav Nosson said about Reish Pei that it's like paraduma, that it's Mikaya the Tameh, but it's Metame Kator,
Sure.
which is really, that's what the Kohen Gadol is, the Kohanim, they're basically our friends.
Kohanim are friends.
They bring us in, they're
Right.
with us.
Right. Absolutely. Reya Mahuvim. The tzaddikim take upon themselves the willingness to be malamid zchus on other yidden, even when it's goyrim tsar to me. I'm not a Rav, so I'm not able to say. From my understanding, I would say that first and foremost, health, right? It's very easy for a person to want to give of themselves, give, until there's nothing left, because it's sometimes easier to have nothing left for me than it is to actually look at myself. Right? So I think the Klal Gadol is v'ahavta l'reacha kamoicha. There has to be a kamoicha first. There has to be a point of reference. There has to be a love that I have towards myself, which is the ability to have boundaries and the ability to know what's good for me and what's not bad, what's healthy for me. Always starts with that. By tzaddikim, it might be different. Meaning, Rabbi Nosson saying that a person has to be moishe nefesh ad garmas hatzar. It's not a raya because Rabbi Nosson is writing it. Meaning, Rabbi Nosson is saying this about himself. And again, one can say Rabbi Nosson is speaking to each person, but I think that it comes after a darga of self-assuredness and healthy levels of bittul.
We're talking about every Jew, so yes, I'm talking to you guys. You guys, like, it's awesome. It's like mechazik me more than others, but like there is Jews out there that the interaction can
Sure.
can really hurt.
Sure.
In
Absolutely. And being malamed, being malamed zchus is not ignoring the hurt.
Yeah.
It's ignoring the deliberate cause of the hurt. It's unwilling to identify my hurt with the person who caused it. I'm feeling now an anger, or focus on the emotion. I'm feeling anger as a result of an encounter with another person. Spending time focusing on the person who caused me that anger is just going to lead to negativity. That doesn't mean I have to spend more time with this person in my life, God forbid. Right? That's not, Melamed Zchus doesn't mean let me go and spend time with every person. Find the Nekuda Tova in it. Exactly. And a Nekuda Tova in how I'm feeling as well. Right. All of my stuff. All elements of my stuff. Yeah. I like that. But Aleinu Lizkor Tamid, and we have to remember always, Shekol Kpeda Umechitza Sheshoivrim Umevatlim Ben Echad Lechavero. We have to keep in mind that every resentment and every partition that we shatter, that stands in between us and another person, Mishaber Bazeh Kol HaMechitzos V'Astaros Lamala. When I overcome the tendency towards anger and I break down the wall separating me from another Yid, I'm breaking down the barriers that block the lights from above from coming down. Ve'ein shum tzara ba'olam, and there is no pain in the world, no suffering in the world. She'i efshar lipoil la Yeshua amitis ayidei shemeshaber mechitzos umevaten machlukas meYisrael. There is no amount of suffering or decree on Klal Yisrael that cannot be shattered by the overcoming of machlokas and Klal Yisrael. But again, that has to first and foremost happen by overcoming machlokas within ourselves. That shalom ben adam l'chavero is rooted in shalom ben adam la'atzmo, and not to be libo cholek ala makom, and not to say if only I was there, if only I had this, or if only it was like this, but to find shalom pnimi and to be okay with the circumstances, no matter what the fissure may be. That creates the opportunity to break down the walls that separate other people. Elagam, okay, loy ki chalila kisheyesh mechitzos ben adam lechavero b'chol minei terutzim shasam mebal b'harosh. That because whenever there's machlokas, no matter how many rationalizations and good, valid reasons there are for that machlokas, loy bazeh haderech bachar Hashem. This is not how Hashem chose to reveal Himself in the world. Machlokas tzadikim amitim is a different thing. That's a chayrish and a koitzer. That's two different expressions of Metzias. And as the Gra points out, as Rav Chaim Elazar points out in his Haktama to Nefesh HaChaim and his Haktama in the beginning of Safra Ditzniusa, when tzaddikim argue, true tzaddikim, then our job is to kind of just step back and let that experience take its place. Because there are tzaddikim who are hidden like the Lavyasan of the sea, and there are tzaddikim who are revealed like the Shor Habar of the land. And those two tzaddikim have different mahalchim. And for everybody else, they just, when Yehuda is poigesh with Yosef, V'yigash elav Yehuda, everybody else steps back. Because that's a takruvas, the malka b'malka. Mashiach ben Yosef, Mashiach ben David, there's a shinui there, but that's not the machlokas we're talking about. V'tzadikim be'emes yoidim, and the tzadikim know, she'ha'ke'ev ha'gadol b'yoter shel ha'shchina ha'kadosha hu ha'yidei ma she'ein noyagim kavod echad l'chavero. Tzaddikim know that the biggest cause of pain towards the Shechina HaKadoshah Kavyachol is the machlokas, is the lack of shalom, is the pain that we cause by not engaging each and every person with the kavod hara'ui. And kavod just means presence. Kavod is kvedus. The person weighs something. There's a person in front of me right now. Ichbatli. I have to care. I'm not the only person in the scenario. And all of the geula is tali in zeh. Ki agam shetzrichim koiches ruchniim lipol geulas olam. Yes, we need all sorts of spiritual strength in order to create and bring about the full redemption. Aval kol zeh tali biyadenu. It's all dependent upon us. V'Hashem Yisbarach bevadai noisen lanu hakoiches lahamshich hageula v'hu al yidei achdus nishmas Yisrael. Hashem has certainly given us the strength necessary, and the tool that we need to find this strength in is the unity between nishmas Yisrael. Ki kol echad me'Yisrael u'chelek eloi kai mimal. Because every Jew is a chelek eloi kai mimal. The whole bnei Yisrael him achdus elokus. And bnei Yisrael, when they're me'uchad, it's a gilui of elokus in this world. It's the gilui of the Shechina. The Isser Gomer hu lehistakel al chitzonius ha'adam. It is a fundamental prohibition. It is usher to look at the individual externally. Ki kol echad me'Yisrael yakar ma'oid be'enei Hashem ka'avanim toivos v'margalos. that each and every yid is as precious in the eyes of the Rebbeinu Shalom as a precious stone or a diamond. So, and even though externally it appears that there's someone who's causing me pain, or causing me distinction, yesh gam shemar b'letzaro ba'ofen ora. Ad kedei kach, that there may be a person who's causing me an unbearable level of pain. Im kol zeh muchrach l'stakel alav b'bechinas pinimius shakulo even toiva b'keser melech. I need and I have to look at them with an inner vision that sees them as a beautiful stone in the crown of God. That doesn't mean I have to hang out with that stone. Doesn't mean I have to continue taking that abuse, God forbid. But it does mean that I separate myself from that person, and then I'm done thinking about that person. It's no longer about that person. Even if it's mamash or Russia, it's mashma here. There's halachos about, what level of, what, ad kedei kach, but b'derech klal, every yid b'fnei atzmo, these halachos apply to. If that person is now causing certain elements of tsar, so there's halachic categories of this, but generally the klal gadol is what happened with Rabbi Meir. Rabbi Meir was davening for the sinners to die. And Rebbetzin Bruya, and Bruya means Barer Yud Kei, which is the clarity of what a Kadosh Baruch Hu truly wants, was that stop davening that they die, stop davening that they suffer, daven that the Chatoyim should be taken away from the land. So even when we see a Rasha, Gam Rasha B'Yom Rishaso, I think fundamentally Reish Pei Beis and Likutei Maran says that each and every person has a Nekuda Tova. Each and every person. Again, there's a separate sector of halachos of how one deals with someone who qualifies halachically as a Rasha, right? If it's a choytu machta, if it's a moiser, God forbid. But again, all of those halachic realities do not take away the need to be melamed zchus on a person. Limud zchus does not necessarily mean I have to act with zchus. But even Pinchas, right? Pinchas we see. He's gifted with the bracha of shalom for an act of kanois. Why? Because he held on to the deep awareness that even as I'm engaged in this act of kanois, it's not against Nishmas Yisrael, God forbid. It's against a foreign element in Nishmas Yisrael or against the actions of Nishmas Yisrael, but it's never against Nishmas Yisrael itself. Because b'pnimi it's a chelak eloi kamimal. Muchrach l'stakla lav b'chinas pnimius shekulo even toiva b'keser melech. Ayidei zeh yuchal gam l'stakel limse ba'atzmo sheyesh gam bo harbe tov. And when I learn to look at somebody else with positivity, then maybe I can learn to look at myself with positive eyes as well. When I go through that thought experiment of finding nekudos tovos in other people throughout the day, maybe they're driving somewhere. And again, the rationalizations to find the nekuda tova do not need to be true. It makes no difference if they're true or not. As the Baal Tanya says, the name of the Maggid of Mizrich, Perek Chav Zayin in Tanya, I believe, and he brings it again in Perek Mem Vav, that what happens when love dies? What happens when Ava falls into disarray and a person can't uncover love anymore? So then we have to look at a very strange pasuk which says, Beis Yaakov asher pada es Avraham, the house of Yaakov who came to redeem Avraham. And Chazal say that Avram was saved from the Kivshan Ha'esh b'schus Yaakov. All the tzaddikim ask. Yaakov comes after Avram. How is it that Yaakov saved Avram? So Zak the Magir HaKadosh, that the midah of Avraham is ahava, and the midah of Yaakov is rachamim, compassion, empathy. So what happens when love dies? What happens when ahava can no longer be accessed anymore? At that point, the person has to learn to uncover the ahava mesuteres by way of rachmanas, by being compassionate and empathic on the other individual. They're human. They didn't mean to be this way. They don't mean to behave this way. When they were 5, their plan was not to be this miserable to me. And in that way, we tend to allow the discrepancies to fall away, and we realize that at the end of the day, they're a human being just like I am, and we come to love them.
So how does that work with Yaakov?
Yaakov's midah is rachamim. So Yaakov, asher padas Avram, it's rachamim that redeems love. When love of Avram has fallen, it's the rachmanus, the compassion and the empathy that we can have on the other person that allows us to come back to love them. Lazet sarach is boinenus b'mesiras nefesh. And for this type of work, it demands an element of mesiras nefesh, an overcoming of my natural tendency. Ki bazet tali hashlamas shem havaya baruch hu. Not only is this the healthiest ethical and moral way to function, but it's also the thing that gives a fullness to the name of Shem Havaya. Shari nishmas Yisrael mu'chadim heim b'Shem Havaya baruch hu. There's types of Yidden.
Much easier to have Rachmanus.
It's much easier to have Rachmanus. The world needs Rachmanus. Rachamim Rabim. It's much easier.
Like there are brothers who like really
Yeah.
feel like they
Yeah, and then by the time you're done, when you go through a little bit of a thought experiment in Rahmanas, instead of wanting to yell at them or honk or be mad, you want to get out and hug them and cry with them, because we're both in this together.
That's more practical than dealing with the Russia.
Exactly.
Not
Rahmanas.
like trying to bring yourself
Exactly.
to love the Russia.
Exactly.
Never.
Just say they didn't
See,
mean.
more never.
Right. Imagine when they were 5 and asked, "What do you want to be when you grow up?" This is not what they wanted to do. They didn't wake up this morning because they felt good about themselves and wanted to ruin my day. Clearly something happened to them, and if that happened to them, I have to fight it with Rahmanas. Again, it doesn't mean ignoring what I'm feeling, but it means approaching them with an element of Rahmanas. Because there's Jews who are connected to the Yud, they're Chachmadika Jews, there's Hey Jews, Bina Jews, Vav Jews, Chesed Jews, Gvura Jews. Every different facet of Klal Yisrael can be broken up. Svardim, Ashkenazim, different hashkafos. Everything can find its expression in the Shem Havaya, one os or another, and the different permutations of the name. And the full collective unity of Klal Yisrael in all of their disparate parts that reveal the general body of Klal Yisrael. That's the secret of Hashlama Shem Havaya. That Kavyachal HaKadosh Baruch Hu's name is not Shalem until Amalek is gone. And Amalek is the inability to see the Tov in another Jew. And as long as that inability is present, then the Shem Havaya is not Shalem, as the Rebbe is going to say. Ve'ein Shmo Yisbarach Shalem kol zman she'ein akisei Shalem al yidei sinas chinam. There's nothing that prevents me from grasping the light of HaKadosh Baruch Hu more than the pirud halavavos, than the separation of the hearts of Klal Yisrael. This causes a profound distance in the life of a person. Because a person has not called to mind the need to overcome my natural tendency to judge, and instead to find love or compassion. That's what Mesiras Nefesh means here. Mesiras Nefesh simply means overcoming my most natural tendency to judge. Stopping my thought and thinking otherwise is Mesiras Nefesh. That's what Mesiras Nefesh is. The willingness, as the Chazon Ish says, people make a mistake. There's not a lot of bad midos in the world. There's really only one general midah hakoleles that is goreim every other negative character trait. And it's referred to as haznachas hachayim lezerem hativi, the abandonment of life to the natural proclivity of the self, to do what comes most easily in this moment. Mesiras Nefesh is to stop and do the opposite, or do something different. That's the Mesiras Nefesh. And here, in judging others, it is fundamental. V'zeh kol dagas hatzadikim. This is the entire avoid of the tzadikim. Shemoisrim nafsham avur kol echad meYisrael. That they give their lives mamish for every Jew. Kanoida me'arav hakadosh Rav Elimelech suchs yagan aleinu, like we know from the Heilig Anoya Me'Elimelech. Shebeno meir alav shahaya moiser nafsher avur kol nefesh Yisrael. No matter who it was, he would have given himself over. Hagam sha'anu rechaykim me'zois hadarga. Even though we're very far from this darga, Ein HaKadosh Baruch Hu ba b'trunia and b'yosav, and Hashem is not demanding more than we're capable of doing. Im kol zeh mevakesh Hashem Yisbarach michol echad sheyishtadel bazeh kefi koicho. HaKadosh Baruch Hu requests of each and every individual to put effort in accordance with their capacity into this avodah. Shebemadrega pshuta ma'od, on a very simple level. Lasus cheshbon nefesh lisboinim eino mitzar is a nefesh Yisrael. The beginning of the day, to have in mind when I get into my car, Hashem, help me not cause any pain to another Jew, whether it's by way of my anger, my frustration, my short-temperedness, my arrogance, whatever it might be. And then do it the next time I get into the car. I don't have to do it for more than one car ride at a time. And when I walk into my home, I kiss the mezuzah and I say, Hashem, help me recognize that I can't cause anyone in this home pain right now. Or when I'm at my job or when I'm in shul, it's easy to break it up into bite-sized manageable pieces like that. And so too, at the end of the day or at the end of that moment, to find forgiveness, to realize it's not about me. Forgiveness doesn't mean letting go of the frustration or the pain. It means realizing that this person didn't do it deliberately. And this is also actual Mesiras Nefesh. Because in truth, there is a form of false love of Klal Yisrael. So if I daven for someone who's not feeling well, or if I daven for someone, and in that sense I've accomplished the mitzvah of Aves Yisrael, you haven't made your friend the king at this point. You haven't revealed the power of that yid that nobody else in the history of the world has had. Ve'ein ze Avos Yisrael mitas. I'm sorry. When I'm not focusing on the depth of it, it's not true Avos Yisrael. Kitzarech achdus amiti belevu benefesh. Hine anu oimdim lekabel hayom tov hakadosh de Pesach. Bevade kol echad mevachesh lahachin nafshe lekabel or karoi b'schatshus v'soros halev b'simchas v'chayis. Yes, we're coming closer to Yontif, and all of us desire to prepare ourselves properly to receive the renewal of the light of Pesach and that Hisaris Halev that comes down with vitality and joy. How do we do it? We have to destroy Amalek. We have to destroy Amalek in order to be Mekayim it. As Rabbeinu says in Torah Lamed, Amalek is Gematria Ram. Amalek is the sense of haughtiness, is a sense of self-importance, is a sense of being the most important in the scenario, and that's the aspect of Ram Levavecha V'Shachachtas Hashem. That when my heart is haughty, when I feel that I'm the most significant in this encounter, at that point I begin to forget the name of Hashem. V'zeu Iker HaPagam da Amalek, and this is the essential issue that Amalek brings, Masha Adam Machsik Atzmo Ram Umenusa Yoter Mechavero, that a person thinks that they're better than their friends for one reason or another. Whatever it is, because of my Nekuda Sachein, Kilo, I'm better than your Nekuda Sachein. That's the Nekuda of Amalek. Ram Levavecha V'Shachachtas Hashem. V'haderech limchois es Amalek v'hagaiva. And how do we come to erase Amalek and Gaiva? It's the Bechina of Zachar es Asher Asalecha. Hainu Lishmor al Zikaron. We have to remember this. There's nothing more dangerous in the field of caring about another person than forgetfulness. Because if I forget, I'm lost. The moment I forget to hold deeply and tightly on my need to judge the other favorably and kindly, I'm lost. Because it's so frustrating and people can be so maddening at every moment that without a zikaron, without remembering it perpetually, I'm already lost. Not to forget and not to make myself as if someone who forgot the kavod that my friends need, even if it's a justifiable anger or frustration. Most of the time we're not thinking about what we're doing or we're saying. Because we think that I can't do anything in a different way. But in truth, a little bit weiter, Chavra. Ve'ein l'shar. What? Zas Hashem. Ve'ein l'shar gadol hanachas ruach v'hatainug v'hasimcha lamala shagoyrim ha'adam kishemar be'achdas ben adam l'chavero. And it is impossible to judge or to value the nachas ruach and the chayin that comes down when Klal Yisrael cause love between their fellows. And not only the chitzonius, to see myself as the same as every other Jew. Whether it's like the Chazon Ish would say that the fact that I am a Torah observant individual, if one can say that about themselves, is not because of any schus of my own. It's either schus avos or it's a limud, and it's a system that I was born into. But anybody who doesn't operate in the same wavelength can be considered a tinoik shenishba. That the microsystems and the macrosystems and the traumas of their lives have created a space where this was not a possibility for them right now. Even if they had it a moment before. It's not our job to judge anybody. Forget judging favorably, forget judging negatively, not judging bichlal, seeing myself as not being in a position to judge. There's a region a judge sits on top or separate, because to judge something implies a separation. But when I'm unified, when I sit amongst my people, so there's no judgment whatsoever. All there is ahava ha'adadis. K'moya Baal Shem Tov HaKadosh. And like the Baal Shem Tov, sheloi hisiach daisai me'ashchina ha'kadosha kol yimei chayev afilu rega achas. The Talmidim of the Baal Shem Tov were meir alav, shelo hisiach daisai klal me the Shechina. The Baal Shem Tov did not stop thinking about the Shechina HaKadosha for a minute, which means Aves Yisrael, because every chelek nishmas alei kaimimal is an aspect of the Shechina. And as the Baal Tanya says in the 32nd parak, Lev HaTanya, each and every nitzutz, when I can see the nitzutz of the Shechina within the other, all the reasons of anger and frustration fall away right away. She'in lanu hasaga b'zaklal, we have no idea what it means that the Baal Shem Tov lived on that level. We have no idea. Ki yesh lanu l'dasha Shechina HaKadosha klula mikol nishmas Yisrael. But what we have to understand is that the Shechina is the sum total of all of the souls of Israel. V'chol Yehudi hu ever mishchina hakadosha. And every Jew is a limb of the Shechina kavyachol. Misha writes l'chabed es hashchina k'derech habal shem tov. And someone who wants a connection to God in this world, which is the kavod that we give to the presence of God in this world, which is the Shechina, tzarech lirois eich kol echad meYisrael hu chelek min hashchina hakadosha. A person has to see how each and every person is a chelek of the Shechina. L'kayim hamlachas chaver chalev. And I'm going to read the words of the Rebbe here, which I haven't seen before in a mimer, but I think the topic brings to this word. V'yesh lisboine bazeg rabo. So we have to spend a lot of time thinking about this. Gewald. Gewald, we have to think about this. We want the connection to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. We want to bring nachas ruach to the Rabbeinu Shalom. Lichlal ba'avodas hatzadik emes. We want to be mekusher to the tzadikim. U'b'or ha'torah u'b'elikusa yisparach shemo. V'chol echad ma'achel zois la'atzmei l'bana v'chol darosav. We all want this for ourselves and our children, God willing. But the key towards the path that leads to this is disgusting in the eyes of most of the world. Why? Because if the Shechina is stuck in Afar, then every gate that brings towards elevating the Shechina is going to look like Afar. And nafshi ka'afar al-choltiya, making myself small in the face of others or equalizing myself, appears to be bizyonos. I'm not the same as that person. I'm educated, I know Shas, I know this, I know that, I'm smarter, my family's this, I have this, I don't do that, I don't do this. All of that feels like Afar, but that's specifically the gateway towards the Shechina HaKadosha. Misha writes of the Chabad es Hashchina b'derech habal shem tov. A person has to enter into that place of Afar. Ve'in misha yirmiyahu miroiv oitzem nechitzos ha'inyan. And there's nobody who's willing to dive deep down into it, because of how stuck it seems. Because if we truly knew where the gold and the gems were hidden, each and every person would spend all the time in the world loving their fellow. And we're going to end with this paragraph. Each and every person has to judge each and every other yid l'chavschus. Ki b'nei Yisrael him begolus. Because when Klal Yisrael in galus, ve'over aleihem tsarus v'yisurin. Each and every yid suffers an unimaginable amount in this world. Each and every person has their own story of Yisurin. Ve'ein echad yodeya ma shenaseh b'leiv chavero. And there's nobody who has any idea what is going on in the heart of their friend. V'im haya yodeya hatsaros v'yisurin sheyesh l'chavero b'chol prat b'chol makom. And if a person truly understood the pain and the difficulty that their friend goes through in each moment, haya yodeya ma'alas chashivus kol echad me'Yisrael eich she'adayin hu oches ba'atzma b'yahadus. We would see a miracle in each yid that they're still holding on to anything related to Yiddishkeit. If we understood what was going on in the lives of each person, the mere fact that they're walking in this world and connected to Yiddishkeit would be a nace in our eyes, and it would force me to accept their malchus upon me. Ki lechol echad meYisrael yesh chidushim noiraim v'niflaim. Each and every yid is a chiddush noira v'nifla that no other yid is. V'nisayrim sha'ashuim elyonim al yidei kol echad meYisrael. And there are sha'ashuim and joys and pleasures that ascend to the highest place in HaKadosh Baruch Hu's worlds kavyachol through each and every Jew. Sha'afilu sha'over kol minei hastaros v'yisurin v'ha'alamos. That even though they've gone through all the concealment and the suffering and the hiddenness, im kol zeh mamshich la'avedes Hashem b'chol koychei u'ma'odo. They're continuing to serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu with all of their strength and all of their intensity. And what we see when a person is not functioning in the way that perhaps they should be functioning, it's not on purpose. We say on Yom Kippur, Ki kol ha'am b'shkaga. That's what we announce on that most halig day of judgment. The first thing we have to recognize is Ki kol ha'am b'shkaga. Nobody here has done anything deliberately. And then we can sing and dance and say Ashamnu, Baganu, Gazalnu, because we know we didn't do it deliberately. It's not us anymore. Right? So when a person pays attention to the fact that each and every person is an Even Toiv, through that, again, this is clearly working off of Reish Pei Beis. That's how the light is going to come out. And Be'ezras Hashem, there's more. I'm going to send out the file so everyone can see the mimer inside, because the words are mamash necessary. But the avoid of Pesach is the avoid of Pesach, to open up our mouths with words of kindness to other people, with words of kimcha de pischa. That's not only something of material support, which is obviously the most fundamental material support when it's needed, but there's also a Pesach, a tzedakah that's given by being melamed schus on another person. Tzedakah is tziduk hadin, is judging another person favorably. And with that, we can be zoichet to leave Mitzrayim of our own experiences and to be zoichet to the Geula Shlema Be'ezras Hashem.